Hey guys, welcome to the I Hope to Hear This podcast. And I have, this podcast kind of makes me nervous because I've known Nina for such a long time. Um, but, anyways, welcome to the podcast, Nina Yi. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah. I think, with the exception of my brother and John Muksanim, you might, I might have known you the longest of all the people I've had on my podcast.
Really?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
actually, yeah, that makes sense because I've known you since
Like 2010,
man,
maybe
it was
earlier. Yeah,
so long ago that I don't even know.
yeah,
Yeah, no, it has to be earlier than 2010
yeah, yeah,
because that's when I was 2010. I was a sophomore in high school, and I'm pretty sure I knew you before that.
yeah. So it was,
Yeah.
I mean, because I wasn't attending our church at the time, but I
Mm,
was kind of in and out because my parents and my brother were.
yeah.
And and the reason why it makes me nervous is like something I recently recognized and realized about myself is I definitely have a podcast like personality, like a separate personality in my podcast.
Hmm.
And in my everyday life, like I have a completely different personality. I feel like I'm a lot like because I want the podcast to be uplifting, I'm a lot nicer on the podcast. But in real life,
Mm,
especially to people I'm like really close to and like I've known for a long time, I'm really mean, like I like cracking jokes and stuff like that. So
yes,
there's like an internal
this is
struggle.
true, everyone.
There's
This is true.
there's like
God is saying something to him right
there's an internal struggle right now,
now.
but we'll see how it goes. So Nina, thanks for being on. There are
Yeah, thanks for having me.
several things I wanted to talk to you about because, um, yeah, I think it's not really so much about like a specific topic, but I feel like there are things in your life that we can learn from, and that's just really interesting to talk about.
Mhm.
And you were recently on Harvest's Tuesday Talks. So for people who don't
I
know
was.
what Harvest is, it's a ministry started by Selena Chang and Jane Moe, who were
Hmm.
also previous guests. But it's a I might have them on one day, so I don't want to get too deep into it. But it's basically they're trying to empower girls, right, through their ministry.
Hmm.
And you
Yep.
were on kind of talking about your faith journey, right?
Hmm.
And one of the big components of your faith journey is worship, because you're a worship leader. And even during these quarantine times, you're one of the few like skeleton crew members who still goes to church to put on the live service.
Yes.
So yeah, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that. How like what is worship to you, and how has it really shaped you, and especially from the perspective of a leader, of a worship leader.
Mm. Yeah. So, sorry for those of you guys who tuned in on Harvest's live stream because I'm probably going to repeat a lot of what I already said on there. But yeah, worship. So I've been on praise team and a worship leader for um man, definitely more than 10 years, maybe like 12 or 13 years now. I started when I was in middle school, so it's been a really long time, and it's definitely been a lot of growing pains and a lot of learning, and I'm still growing and still learning. Um, but I guess going back to your question of what is worship to me, I think over time, in the beginning, it was definitely my way of being known and being seen by other people. I think when you're in those teenage years, like you're so desperate for people to want to acknowledge you and pat you on the back and compliment you and all of these things. And I think um, yeah, I saw like all of these older people doing it and I was like, that's so cool. I want to be like them. And so it became more of a platform for me in the beginning and um, just a way to look cool. But I think over time, worship became my foundation. Um, I mean, I've loved music since I was young, even before joining praise team. And so I knew that I always had this I guess, emotional connection when it came to worship. I think like when I hear a specific song from a specific point in my life, it kind of takes me back to that point in my life. And so worship just kind of became that for me. Worship, it became my way of connecting with not only who I am and my journey and my faith, but also who God is and my kind of relationship with Him. For me, more than, prayers and conversations with God, or more than like reading His scripture, which I still do, obviously, and it's still a huge part in your faith journey. But I think worship is my way of really being able to connect with Him and understanding His heart a little bit more than maybe the other ways that we use to obviously connect with Him. And so, yeah, worship has just really become my foundation in my faith journey, I think, especially over time. And there's still a lot to learn and a lot to grow within worship, but that's kind of what it is to me. And that kind of went into and played into my role as a worship leader, and wanting and having that heart of wanting to lead other people into that space as well. And for those few people who may have that kind of same emotional connection to music and to worship as me, I want to be able to provide a road and a space for them to meet Christ in the place of that worship. And so that's kind of my heart behind the ways I lead worship, or my role as a worship leader.
So
Yeah.
I understand like the growth part. When you say there's a lot more to learn
Mhm.
and grow, do you mean kind of the spiritual side, or do you mean more from like a technical side? Because there's two
Both.
aspects, right? Oh, okay.
Yes, there are definitely two aspects. I think worship, definitely you kind of sort of need the technical aspect, and you also definitely need that spiritual aspect. And when I mentioned growing and learning, I definitely mean both. I think there's still so much to learn technically, whether it's um, in the ways that I play an instrument, or in the ways that I sing, and also in the ways of speaking, I guess, as well.
Mm,
Because, as a worship leader, there are speaking moments where you read scripture or say certain things to, you know, encourage your congregation to worship alongside with you and things like that. And so I definitely lack in that part. I'm terrified of public speaking. And so it's definitely a part of worship that I lack on. So in that part, I personally have a lot of growth to do. Um, but yeah, I think technically there's always something to learn. And even with not just only the on stage stuff, but behind the scenes stuff with like the mixers and all of that kind of thing, I still have no idea how to do those things. And so that's also a learning thing too. And definitely spiritually, I have so much to learn. um, I don't think, like, in this life, in whatever capacity that we serve or do something for the church, or for the kingdom, I don't think we're ever going to master one thing.
mm,
So in this topic, we're always talking about worship leading, but I don't think in this life, or even in the next life, like, I could ever master leading worship. And so spiritually, obviously, I'm not perfect, and I have so much to grow in, just in my own faith. And I wrestle with God, I wrestle with myself every single day. And, like any one of us, I have my good days and I have my bad. And that obviously affects, my worship leading as well. And so spiritually, learning to lean on God, even when I lead a song, I'm learning how to lead that song. If it's a new song, then obviously I have to learn a new way to learn a new song, um, by, really reading the lyrics and making sure I understand what I'm singing and what I'm leading, um, the congregation in. And so in that aspect, definitely, I think spiritual growth is probably the biggest part where we constantly have to work on and work towards, I think.
Mm.
I don't know if that made sense, but
Oh, yeah, that did. So yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit about from a technical, like a vocalist perspective, because although right
hmm
now you are leading with the guitar, you're mainly like a vocalist, right?
yes.
And me and my wife say this all the time. We feel like you're one of the best vocalists that, well, definitely our favorite vocalist that we know. And all so much so that you are actually you sang the what's it called? The celebration
The
song?
Yeah,
What's
the congratulatory
Yeah, the
song at your
congratulatory song.
wedding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, right. So
hmm
for people out there who want to, obviously, priority in leading worship is developing like your spiritual like sensitivity and like really understanding how to lead people in worship. But it's also important
hmm
to work on the technical side, right? So,
hmm
like, do you have any advice on how to develop that part of your skill set, like the vocal part?
Oh man. Yeah, well, thank you for the compliment. I'm so bad at taking compliments, but thank you. Yeah, I think, I mean, there's no one wrong or right way, and I don't even think that I specifically had a like particular method that I used to like learn how to sing better, because obviously I didn't sound like I sound now. Earlier when I was first joining praise team, I was really bad, didn't know how to harmonize or anything. But a lot of what I did is just singing along to like any and all worship songs. I would just play it when I'm at home doing nothing, or in the car when I drove, and different things like that. And I would just like, even, it's kind of funny, but my sister and I would like play a song, and we would take turns like harmonizing different parts, just to like, we were obviously goofing around, but it definitely helped because as a vocalist, there are times where you don't just sing the melody and you have to harmonize different parts. And so it really helped develop my kind of understanding of, okay, what does a harmony mean, and how can I sing that in this particular song, and different things like that. So definitely tons and tons of practice, but yeah, not only just listening and singing along, but also watching like people who are older than me, and watching different worship leaders, whether like famous ones or not famous ones, and just Unnis and Oppas from the community. I think just watching them and how they do it helped a lot too. Like um, Helen Bay, I don't know if she's been on the podcast before, but I think she was on the last one with me,
Yeah, with
with the
Parasite.
Parasite
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Yeah. So she was actually my worship leader for a really long time in youth group, and I learned a lot from just watching her sing, and the way that she um, just kind of carried her voice. And I remember asking a lot of questions of like, okay, how do I sing this particular part, or um, things like that. I also saw some really like basic vocal training voices too, or vocal training videos too. So like
Mm,
just, the aspect of like, opening up your diaphragm, and, felt like singing with like a tight stomach, and all of this like technical things. But I think, yeah, you ultimately, I think you have to want to get better. And this is with anything, not only just singing, but you have to want to get better. And with that wanting, you will find ways to get better. And obviously that's with a lot of practice, and finding your ways of like just watching people, or practicing over and over again, and different things like that.
yeah. So because I asked the question because when you first start something, if you have absolutely no idea how to even begin
hmm
getting better, it can be difficult. But I think the
yeah
two pieces of advice that you give are crucial. Like one, like going online and looking up voice coaching videos. I think that's very simple to
hmm
do. And also to like look to those older than you, look to those who came before you to kind of use them as your examples, right? And to like
Yeah.
try to follow them, mimic them. I think that that's like really, really good, solid way to like get started. And if you have that
Hmm.
desire to keep getting better, then you'll, like you said, find more ways to get improved, like to improve upon that as well.
Right.
So yeah, I really appreciate that. And I alluded to this in the beginning, but we talked about how you are, so it's me, you, our pastor, Pastor John, and Tim, who show up every
Hmm.
Sunday on Sunday morning to put on the live stream, right? I'm just in the background
Hmm.
doing the video and all that. But you're like on the actual stand, still playing guitar, like still singing. And it's, the action is the same, but it's vastly different, right? Because we have
Hmm.
this, the speakers don't even work anymore. We have everything connected
Yeah.
directly into the computer for the live
Hmm.
stream. So it's, when you're playing, it sounds like you're doing it completely like acoustic. And
Yeah.
there's no one in the congregation except me behind the laptop.
Yeah.
So those are very different. It's a very different environment, right? So how
Hmm.
has the transition been going from leading worship in a room like with usually like 50 people to now like two
Hmm.
people sitting in the pews?
Yeah. The transition definitely has been a little tough. Um, I think, yeah, it's always just weird trying to lead worship in an empty room. Like in this case, completely empty, except for obviously David in the back. But um, I think, yeah, the transition in the beginning, I think I think the first maybe week or two, I didn't really think anything of it. I was just like, okay, let's just do it. And I think it was because we were just in the midst of all the craziness of first settling into quarantine and figuring out how to even do a live stream and different things like that. But once we kind of got our footing down, yeah, I mean, even till this day, it's still really tough. And I think it's just almost like a psychological thing. It's just hard to kind of create a space for a space that doesn't have anybody, even though you know that there are people watching through a screen. Um, for me, I don't know, maybe it's just a mental thing, but it's just been kind of tough to grasp. And I think another part of that is, like you mentioned earlier, I am mainly a vocalist. I don't really play guitar. And so I know basic, the four chords, and I can, play just about any song as long as it can have a capo and those four chords. And so I think because of that, and because I'm playing guitar every Sunday too, um, I definitely have to concentrate a lot more on my guitar, which hinders me from concentrating on like the songs that I'm actually leading, or like how I'm leading through the screen, if that makes sense. And so yeah, the transitions definitely, I mean, we're living in weird times. And so it's been a little, yeah, difficult for me, if I'm not gonna lie. But I also think there was this one Sunday a couple weeks ago, I led a song that's relatively new, but one of the lyrics said, "Oh, magnify the Lord, let us exalt his name together." And when I first heard that song, I think I was really just humbled and um, just taken back by the fact that even though the transition's been tough, and even though I'm having to learn how to lead a congregation through a screen and in an empty room. And like you said, I can't even hear myself half the time because we don't plug our stuff into the speakers anymore. Um, but after hearing that song, it just really brought me back to the beauty of like, man, it's just so great that we're even able to even lead worship like this because of the technology that we have, and we're still able to really sing that song together, even if we're not physically together, we're virtually still together. And I mean, of course, even if we didn't have this technology, that song we can still sing, but it just kind of hit me a little bit more. And for that particular week, I wasn't so much worried about what I was playing, and I was more worried about the words that I was singing and how I wanted to challenge and encourage our community and our ministry to worship alongside with us during that particular song, especially. And so, yeah, the challenge is still there, and I think as this quarantine progresses for how much ever longer, we're definitely going to see different challenges still. And for me, the challenge of speaking and leading and playing guitar is obviously still going to be there. But yeah, I think there's a little bit more peace than there was in the beginning of just, yeah, the goodness of just being able to come together even in that way, which allows me to kind of shift my mindset and shift my heart a little bit when I do lead worship virtually.
Mm. Yeah, and
Mm.
I am glad we talked about this because for those people listening who do attend live services, I just want them to know and realize it's not just the same old thing for most of the worship leaders. It's and even for
Mm.
the pastors, right? They're preaching to an empty room. I'm sure is vastly different from preaching to a camera, right? So I'm hoping that people who do attend live services will kind of appreciate the people who are still coming out to church to put on the service, because it's not just, oh, we're it's a simple transition. There's so many things that are different about it, and
Mm.
everyone's just soldiering through it. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I personally think that our services sound and are very good. They're very well done, I think. Um, so kudos to the team. But as we're talking about the quarantine and the effect of
Mm-hmm.
COVID-19 to our lives, there's another thing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this sounds really personal, but I think it's important to talk about because it's happening to so many people. And also,
Mm-hmm.
for the listeners, I got permission from Nina to talk about this before. So, but yeah, during your day job, something happened as an
Yes.
impact of COVID-19, right?
Yes. So my day job is I'm a project coordinator, which is basically in my role, I'm basically an executive assistant to VPs and different people in the company. And I also work in the hospitality industry. So I work for a company um, that is definitely heavily impacted. This industry, the hospitality industry, the hotel and travel industry, was probably the first to be like really impacted by COVID-19. And so, yeah, we actually got an announcement yesterday that 52% of our company was um, scheduled to be furloughed starting June 6th for 3 months. And I unfortunately was a part of that 52%. So, yeah, definitely. Um, I don't even think really was a shock, just because obviously we know how hard COVID hit this industry. So I think most of us were anticipating that something like this was going to come sooner or later. And so it wasn't too much of a shock. But yeah, it's definitely not the best feeling in the world being furloughed, but I think yeah, I think in the beginning I was very anxious because the the message was just they kept like dragging out the message of like, okay, this is coming, but they wouldn't tell us like who it would impact until like way later in the afternoon. And so I think because of that, it made me super anxious and super stressed out about, okay, what do I do about rent and all of these things. But I think there was just this like wave of like calmness that came, and I was like, I think it'll be okay, and whatever happens happens, and maybe this is a blessing in disguise. Just being able to have a summer vacation while I'm, in the corporate world, which is like, never heard of. And so I'm just kind of in good spirits, thinking of it in a positive way, and possibly, starting up some projects or something like that that's been kind of in the back closet. So yeah, that's kind of the weekly news from our company this week. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So when you talk about being furloughed from your company, for those of us who don't know, what does furlough exactly mean? You're not fired all the way, right?
hmm Yeah. So furloughed means that you are still an employee of the company technically. And every company kind of does furlough a little bit differently, I think, but basically you're still an employee of the company, but you're not allowed to work, which means you normally receive like zero pay.
Mm.
Our company is actually still paying us like very, very, very little, like a small percentage of our paycheck. But yeah, basically you don't work at all. And I think the max is 90 days at in one period. Um, so I think, stretched out all 90 days.
Wow.
But yeah, so essentially, if you simplify it, like you're still employed there, your hours have just been cut to zero. And even if you want to work, you're legally not allowed to. And so most companies will like cut your access to like your calendars, emails, and stuff like that.
Wow. What about like
Mhm.
health benefits and things like that you would normally have?
So for I don't know if it's like this for every company, but our company has decided to keep paying our portion of the health benefits. So they'll still provide our health benefits throughout the furlough period. So health benefits, and we get to still keep our like company items like our laptops and phones and things like that, and we're able to use them for personal use, of course, along the lines of security measures, but
Right.
yeah, we still get to keep those things, and the company will still provide health benefits. We just won't get like a full paycheck, and we're not allowed to work.
Okay. And so is your company, because with COVID-19 happening, one of the things that the federal
Mm-hmm.
government did is if the employer files a claim of unemployment for the employee, they
Mm-hmm.
can receive up to like, I think it's $600 a week. Is your company
Mm-hmm.
doing that?
Yes. So I think, from what I understand, I believe it's like Georgia law that the company has to file it for you,
Hmm.
or at least that's what I was told. And so our company is filing unemployment for us. And so we are expected to get the full amount.
Okay, that's great. So
Mhm.
that's I mean, I know the administration has been getting a lot of criticism for the way that the response to
Mhm.
COVID-19, right? But one of
Yeah.
the good things through the stimulus package was, I think, with the second stimulus package that's trying to be passed in the Senate and the House of Representatives and all that in Congress, um,
Mhm.
the $600 a week of unemployment is supposed to extend till January of next year.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
I'm not exactly sure how much it is, when it is up until right now in its current state. But I
Right
think
now
that,
it's until July 31st,
oh, okay, wow.
I
Yeah,
believe. Mhm.
yeah. So, oh, that's good to know. Wait, so for you then, once after it's July, if the second stimulus package doesn't pass, then you wouldn't be receiving those checks, right? Because
Mhm. So my furlough is until the end of August. And so for the first 2 months of my furlough, I will receive that. But then afterwards, starting in August, I'll just receive like the normal, like base unemployment
mm,
and the weekly paycheck, small paycheck that I get from my company.
yeah. So hopefully that
Mhm.
second stimulus package will pass. But I think we do need to give credit to the government for not forgetting about people who are getting laid off like this in these situations.
Yeah.
Because um, like I would have been really sad for you if you weren't getting anything, but because there's kind of that safety net of
hmm
the federal unemployment, you talked about how you were gonna try to, do some projects that you've had on the back burner, right? And I
Mhm.
think it's like the perfect time to do it. Because like we were talking about
Mhm.
this yesterday, and right when you told me, I was like, oh wait, like she doesn't need to worry too much about finances because she's still getting something.
Mhm.
So she should kind of pursue some things that she's really good at, that she's done many times before, but hasn't really ever like gotten it kicked off, right? So you want to talk a little
Mhm.
bit about those back burner projects that you mentioned?
Yeah. I actually was thinking about this because I think in our Sunday Bible study this past week, you asked like what our passion project was, and I said like some really like generic answer because I was like doing something else and I wasn't really um, paying attention in that first part. But yeah, my passion project has always been um, well, a little bit of background. I think um, something that I realized about myself is I just love celebrating people. And I love like, making sure that they feel known and loved and celebrated, whether it's their birthday or um, like weddings or engagements or baby showers, whatever it is. And so um, one thing kind of led to another over the last few years, and I've just really um, realized that I love wedding planning. Um, well, wedding planning specifically, but overall just event planning, like whatever event that it is. I just really enjoy doing it. Not only the aspect of like organizing an event from like decorating to like games or guest list, whatever it is, but also the fact that whoever I'm doing it for, they just feel celebrated and they feel seen in my small act of, coordinating something for them. So, yeah, during this kind of 3-month period, I was thinking about getting like officially certified. I think uh, David mentioned that I did it a couple of times for my close friends, but I never did anything professionally. Um, and so, yeah, I was thinking about getting certified as like a professional event planner,
Mm.
and then possibly like starting up like a website or Instagram or something like that slowly and trying to create a portfolio and a clientele and all of that good stuff. Um, Eventually, that's like my stay-at-home mom plan for my 5-10 year future. So yeah, that's what I was thinking about. I haven't really thought through it much. Obviously, it's really only been a day since the announcement came out, but it was something that kind of popped up into my mind when that announcement was made. Yeah.
So I wasn't aware. Are there actual like classes you can take to be certified as a
Mhm.
event planner? Oh.
Yeah, so you can get like certified by taking, again, I haven't done too much research, but I believe there's like options where you can take like one or like just like a handful of classes for like a cheaper price and you can get certified. But also like I know like UGA offers like a program for event planners that you can apply to
Hmm.
and take. I don't know how long the classes are. I want to say maybe it's like a couple months or like at least one semester or something like that. But you can also take the program and get certified and as like a event planner coordinator.
Gotcha. So
Hmm.
um like you said, I did mention that you have done it in the past. And like just
Hmm.
off the top of my head, you've done like several baby showers, like bridal showers, you've also coordinated, weddings. Like you do, I feel like there's so many different aspects of all these events. What would you say
Hmm.
your strengths are when you're planning these things? What is, well, not even strength. What do you enjoy doing the most? Like whether it's decoration, whether it's game planning, or yeah.
Um, hmm. I think I think my top two, I think would be I love decorating. Um, Obviously, I've done it in a smaller scale. I've done it in a slightly bigger scale. Um, but yeah, I love decorating. I don't know, it's just really fun to just put things together. Um, but also, one of my favorite things that I've done is day of coordinator for weddings. Um, Again, I didn't, obviously, it was, for friends. So it wasn't like professionally done, or I wasn't like, um, you know, the day of coordinator that, knows everything in and out of the wedding and things like that. But um, for example, I think for Selena, for her wedding, I wasn't necessarily the day of coordinator, but I worked with the day of coordinator for the wedding venue. And so I was kind of like the liaison, and I helped kind of coordinate a lot of things with her, for Selena.
Mm.
And so, yeah, day of coordinating, it's really stressful, and it's a lot of work. You're constantly like running around and making sure everything's ready, and a lot of people ask you questions, and you have to point them in the right direction and different things like that. But despite all the stress that comes with it, I think it's just a lot of fun. It makes me like I'm a busybody, and so just having that, you know, kind of rush of doing a bunch of things at once, is like oddly satisfying.
Mm.
So those are probably my two favorite things. Yeah.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense because um, I know whenever we do something at church, we look to you to do a lot of the decoration. Actually, with Lois, I don't think she's ever been on the
Hmm.
podcast, but she loves
Hmm.
doing the calligraphy stuff. So
Yep.
like you two put together, you guys put on really good decorations. And I want to stress to people who don't know how important day of wedding plan coordinators are. If you try to pull off a wedding without a coordinator,
Hmm.
it's just going to be so stressful. You're not even going to be able to enjoy your own wedding. I remember on during our wedding, we hired someone to be our coordinator, and she literally just did everything for us. Like she gave us the signals for when to come out to walk down the aisle,
Hmm.
like during the ceremony, and then like when to leave and like when to come back for the reception, like all those kind of things. And she like we gave her all the envelopes for like tipping all of the different vendors. Like she took care of all of
Hmm.
that. So if anybody out there is gonna get married after the lockdown's over and you need a coordinator, you can reach out to Nina because
Hit me up.
yeah, I guarantee you won't regret that. If you'll definitely regret trying to have a wedding without a coordinator, day of coordinator. And there's like a difference, right? There's a wedding planner who kind of does all the
Hmm.
planning leading up to the wedding, and then there's a
Hmm.
coordinator who like I want to say like the planner is like the architect, and the coordinator is like
Hmm.
the person who like pulls off the construction, right? It's like the same thing
Yeah.
but in two different phases.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, basically the event planner will like plan all the little details with you, like what kind of caterer you want, like all of that good stuff. And then the day of person will actually like execute a lot of the things. Like you said, they'll usually, because surprisingly not a lot of people know like how they want to do the processional, which is like the walking down the aisle thing. And so usually they're at the back door like queuing, the bridesmaids, the groom, and all of them, and queuing like whenever they're supposed to go into like the reception and different things like that. So it's a lot of executing,
yeah,
a lot of
and like
hands-on. Yeah.
if you think about the sheer number of people involved in the wedding, because both the bride and groom's parents are involved, they're doing stuff. There's
Mhm.
like friends, there's photographers, there's videographers, there's so many different things, right? And
Yeah.
not needing to answer all their questions on the day of is the best thing you could do for yourself. Because
Mhm.
if there's a coordinator, all the questions will go to the coordinator, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I think it's a great idea, Nina. You should definitely pursue that, and definitely once if you have a Instagram and all that, we can share it on our podcast too. So people
Yeah, that'd be
can
great.
reach out to you. But again, that's not the only thing she does. Like she also throws wonderful baby showers and bridal showers and things like that. So yeah, hit her up if you guys need to.
Yeah, hit me up.
So you said that this was your stay-at-home mom dream, like dream job. So does that mean that you
Yeah,
eventually like you wanna like I guess leave your day job?
yeah. So my day job was actually like not something that I am or like was super passionate about. Um, I think it like the opportunity definitely fell into my lap, and it's like such a great opportunity, and I'm so glad that I was, lucky enough to be able to be in that position. But um, obviously, my role is a coordinator role, so it's a lot of administrative work and a lot of coordinating. And so it's just something that I've always done a little bit and always enjoyed and been good at. And so I was like, oh, why not? It's like the perfect day job for me. But it wasn't like my dream. And I don't think, like for me, growing up, um, like I obviously had different career aspirations before wanting to go into the corporate world. I wanted to be a teacher for a really long time, and I did, teach Sunday school, and I even worked at like a private preschool as well, and things like that. But I just realized that none of that was ever like my dream job. And I think my dream job ultimately was to be a mom, and just to be a wife and to have a family. I think ultimately that was like my dream job. And so, um, yeah, hopefully, I can reach that point where I can, once I get married and have kids and different things like that, I'm able to stay at home. But I didn't want to like just stay at home and, not do anything. Except for, watch my kids. I wanted to have some sort of like side hustle where I can, yeah, do something that I love and am passionate about, which is, obviously event planning. And so, yeah, ideally that would be the dream, to be at home with my kids and have kind of my own work schedule, and be able to plan events and coordinate different things here and there. Um, but yeah, one can only dream.
No, but like I said, I think if you ever had a perfect or if you ever had a good time to pursue it, I think it would be now.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that you really get at it, and we as the I hope they hear this community, we will try to keep you accountable so that
Thanks.
you don't lose sight of it. Um, one last topic that I wanted to bring up is,
Hmm.
in fact, on this podcast, you actually mentioned the term, Unni and Oppa a lot,
Hmm.
which is, older brother, older sister from a female's perspective in Korean. And
Hmm.
I had an episode that I recorded with Andy Eun about Hyung culture, and I actually
Hmm.
told the story of when I felt like when I felt that responsibility, and it was actually a story about you. I don't know if you remember, but we
Oh.
were as a church, we were hanging out at a coffee shop, and someone came in saying, "Oh, somebody hit this car. Does this car belong to anybody?" And it turned out to be your car in the parking
Oh,
lot.
yeah.
Yeah, and then you went out to go look at it, and I didn't think much of it, and I was just in the coffee shop. And then you came back later, and you were like, "Hey, can you like help me out? I don't really know what I'm doing." And I kind of use that as an example of like a time where I felt kind of that Hyung, or I guess in this case, the Oppa responsibility, right? And
Mm.
so I wanted to get your perspective on this because one of the things that I said on that podcast is I felt like the Hyung Oppa, Unni Luna culture was kind of dying amongst our
Hmm.
community and our generation. What do you think?
Hmm. I Yeah, I mean, honestly, I do think that it is. I kind of agree. I do think that it is slowly dying. Um, I don't know if it's because, as the generation comes, they're more Americanized and like less and less we lose that Korean identity, I think. Because we're, so immersed. Like even in our generation, we're already so immersed in the American culture. I can't only imagine what our younger generations are. And so I do feel like, yeah, it is slowly like even my brother, he's like 6 years younger than me. He doesn't speak very good Korean, but he like never calls me Nuna. Like not even
Wow.
as he like refers to me to my parents, he's like Nina. He never, well, it's kind of similar, I guess, but he doesn't, call me, he doesn't call me older sister. He calls me by like my first name.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's like, very true for majority of like his age friends too. And he's like 18 right now, but um, yeah, I don't know. Definitely feel like it's lacking. And I also think it's also like because we are also American, like for example, like for us to the generation below us, I think we are Americanized enough where we don't also like really enforce it either. I
Mm-hmm.
think like people older than us and even people older than them, like there was a little bit more of like, oh, why aren't you calling me Hyung or Nuna or Oppa? Because like they were still very fresh in that Korean culture. But I think slowly, even as we are immersed in American culture, like we don't really like force them to call us that. And so they like lose it off of their tongue. And then obviously they won't care if, people younger than them call them that. And so
Mm.
I think it's kind of a trickle down effect. But yeah,
How does
I
that?
definitely still have that culture within me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I can see that. But how does that make you feel? Do you feel like, oh, it's kind of whatever, or do you feel like we're losing something important to our culture, or any opinions?
Um, I think I think if I'm honest, I'm probably more in that kind of whatever stage
Mm.
because I don't think I ever really thought of it until you just asked me that question just now. And so I that obviously I think kind of like, assumes that I never really cared enough to think about it. Um, but if I do kind of like stop and think about it, I think it's a little bit sad.
Mm.
Even though it's such a like minuscule part of our Korean culture and Korean identity, I think it's something that so like for me, growing up, like I couldn't I couldn't not call anybody a neural, but they were older than me. I felt like I was being like so disrespectful and so rude. Like even sometimes like jokingly or unknowingly, I'll just call you David and you'll be like, what did you say? Why do you call me Oppa? And so like even growing up, like, even in that joking sense, I like for me, like I just felt like, oh, they're older than me. Obviously they're on me, obviously they're Oppa. But so I think that it is a little bit sad that we're losing that part. But if I'm being honest, I really didn't think about it until now.
That's interesting because like you say you didn't really think about it, but
Hmm.
even during this podcast, just hearing you talk, it is something that you, at least subconsciously, really think of highly, right? Because even
Mm,
when you talk about like how your development in your worship leading really happened, like one of the first things you mentioned is, oh, I look to my unnis and oppas. Like you look to the people that
mm,
came before you, and so it's obvious that it's in your culture. It's obvious that
mm,
you do think of it highly,
mm.
but it is interesting to hear that like you haven't really thought about it much.
Yeah. I think like also too, for me, I think I grew up in a situation where I literally didn't have a lot of like, if we're talking like church specifically, there was maybe like one person that was my age. Everybody else, like growing up in youth group and even like once I got into our like college ministry, like everybody was older than me. And so I think it was just so like written in me that like, oh, this person is an Unni and this person is an Oppa. Um, and so I kind of like, whereas I feel like right now, when I see a lot of like our younger students and the younger generation, like they they pretty much hang out with people that are their age.
Mm,
And so I feel like also too, like they don't really have, unless they have older siblings, of course, they don't really have like a whole bunch of opportunity to call somebody Unni or Oppa, or Hyung Nuna.
right.
Whereas like specifically in my situation, I only had Unnis and Oppas around me. So like um, that was like just like engraved to my lips
Mm.
growing up. Which is also funny because I'm the oldest, so I never had to call anybody that in my family. But um, yeah, I think that it is interesting. It's an
S-
interesting question.
So just, I'm asking you this because you have a perspective of like someone younger than me, and
Hmm.
like I'm much more in the kind of the more older school like thought mind or thought pool or whatever you want to call it. And so what I said in the podcast I did with regarding this topic, I actually said that keeping the Hmong culture intact as a part of like our Asian American culture is important,
Hmm.
is what I said. Do you feel the same way, or are you do you think it's not as important to like try to cling on to that?
Um, I think mm, I think I'm kind of one foot in, one foot out.
Mm,
Um, in the sense of I do think that it is an important part of our culture. In the sense of like I think something that's really unique about not only Korean culture but just Asian American culture or Asian culture is that um, there's this level of respect and understanding that's like kind of across the board. Whether it's to your parents, whether it's even to like your friends, I think there's like a certain level of understanding that, um, or a certain level of respect that is there that really isn't there like in our American culture. Because like I feel like in the American culture, everything's so casual. Like even when I talk to like my coworkers or like my bosses, if they're older than me, there's this like wall that comes over me where I'm like I have to be super respectful, but they're just like, "Hey, what's up?" and it's so casual. And growing up, I think I probably wouldn't have said that it was a good part of our culture. I would have been like, "This sucks,"
mm,
having to be, you know, always like so respectful to like, adults or like people older than you or even people like um your age too. There's like that like small but
yeah.
still that sense of like respect. um and but now that I'm older, I really think that that is actually like kind of a beautiful part in our culture. And I think as we get older, like there's a bigger appreciation for like that respect and like um having that understanding of like having that respect for that coworker or that friend or that older brother, sister, your family, whomever. Um, and you start to like appreciate it more than you did when you were younger. But at the same time, I think the other foot is um, while I do think it's really important, um, I also feel like if that is one part of the Korean culture that we lose compared to like the so many other parts of the Korean culture and Korean identity, I think it might be okay to lose, if
Mm.
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Like
That makes sense.
yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying, and obviously I agree in that way. Um, but also at the same time, I think it wouldn't be the biggest deal
Mm,
if that were to go away. But Obviously, like it's such a like relevant thing to me that it would still be very like sad.
Mm.
That makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah. No,
to lose that part.
it's definitely interesting to get kind of a younger person's perspective on that because like I only really talk to people older than me about that, so it's a
Mm,
very limited view. But no, that's interesting. Thank you for your perspective on that. So
yeah.
yeah, it's I think we're at the hour mark. Anything we wanted to talk about that we missed, Nina?
I think that was pretty much the chunk of everything.
Yeah.
Don't really have too much going on in my life.
Well, you're gonna, right? You're gonna be pursuing your passion in vet coordinating.
Yes,
So
maybe I'll come back in like 6 months or so to
yes,
give you
please.
an update on how that's going.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, guys, if you have any feedback or anything we talked about resonated with you, or if you simply just want to encourage Nina to pursue her dreams, uh, please you can email me at ihthtpodcast@gmail.com or message me on Instagram at I hope they hear this or on Twitter at IHTHT podcast. And with the post that I put up related to associated with this episode, I'm gonna have Nina tagged. So if you just want to send her a message directly to, um, you can do that. And yeah, I'm sure she'll appreciate the encouragement. So guys, thank you so much for listening. Nina, thank you so much for being on. Did you feel like you were talking to me, or did it feel like you were talking to kind of like a different version of me than you normally do?
Um, I think for the most part, I think I was talking to you. You're definitely nicer on the podcast. I'm just kidding, but you definitely ask questions where I have to like stop and think, and that's like you in real life and on the podcast. So, for the most part, I think you were yourself. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. This was fun.
Yeah, no, and then we'll do it more often as you go journey down your path of event coordinating.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yes,
thank you
we
guys
will.
for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.